TikTok, everyone's favorite app. Except, well, not governments. And why? Well, it all comes down to data. All those millions of TikTok users provide a lot of their personal data. And who do you think has access to that data? Well, that's what's got lawmakers in the West worried. But what about all those other apps and sites we give our data to? Should we be concerned about where it's all going? To answer those questions, we first need to take a look at the lifecycle of your data, so how it's collected and where it goes after that, and how this data collection can be problematic for you as a consumer. Then, we'll explain the laws that the EU brought in to combat these problems. And finally, we'll help you understand the steps you can take to exercise your data protection rights. Okay, so first off, what does the term personal data even mean? Well, it means things like your name, your age, your email address, your home address, even your IP address, which also shows your location even if it's not as precise. Some of our personal data can be pretty sensitive, things you wouldn't really want public or getting into the wrong hands, such as your sexual orientation or health data, or data that reveals your race or ethnicity. And how does all this data get collected?
Personal data are collected in many different ways.
That's Gian Claudio Malgieri, a co-director of the Brussels Privacy Hub.
For example, when we create a profile on a social media platform, or when we create a profile on email service and so on.
That data collection can be really useful and beneficial for us. Our data is used for everything from banking to even healthcare. For example, the more data we have about our past illnesses and the treatments we received, the more our doctors can understand about our health now and help us. And this sort of data collection has been around for ages. What makes things new is how it's now being collected online in ways that are difficult to monitor. Today, way more of our personal data is being stored than ever before. And how is that done?
When we log into a Wi-Fi, the MAC address of our computer or of our mobile phone is collected, and connected to that the IP address, which reveals our geo position. Cookies are specific technologies that are through our browsers on our devices and can collect our navigation histories, our web data, our engagement data.
And there's also social media. When we put a like on Facebook or on Instagram, we're providing data. So, for example, I could be taking a train from London to Paris. I'm browsing my favorite online shop looking for a new coat for a while, before switching over to social media, where I scroll to pass the time. What pops up on my feed? An ad for a fashion store in Paris selling coats. Coincidence? Nope. The browsing data from my shopping search plus my IP address were used to show me an advert for something I might be interested in. But sometimes the information we're giving away is more sensitive than our fashion choices.
There are some personal data that are considered special categories of data, or, as we generally say, sensitive data. These include, for example, data about sexual orientation or sexual life, political beliefs, religious affiliations, trade union membership, genetic data, health records, data related to health conditions, biometric data with the purpose of identifying individuals. So, for example, our face or our eyes and so on.
And that sensitive data can be really useful for some.
Data is the power, it's just this instrument which just gives you access to a lot of other rights.
That's Romain Robert, Program Director at privacy nonprofit NOIB.
Right to target people, to provide content, to censor some content, not to show content to some people if you don't want to show them some content, to influence their political behavior.
But it's clear now that we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well. And that goes for fake news, for foreign interference in elections and hate speech, as well as developers and data privacy. We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake.
That is Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, back in 2018 when he was apologizing to the US Senate for the social media's role in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. That was when Facebook facilitated the collection of the personal data of thousands of people by the British firm, which was then used to influence political behavior. So yeah, data is powerful. The CA scandal focused on the US, but it showed the huge threat that the misuse of data poses to democracy, and more broadly, human rights. Pretty scary stuff, right? So the EU decided a change was needed, and the first regulation to come in was the GDPR.
It's a general data protection regulation.
It's legally binding across the 27 different European states, and it also applies to any organization that collects data on EU citizens, even if it's not based in the EU. So the GDPR is one of, if not the toughest privacy and security laws in the world, and underlines data protection as a fundamental right. Meaning? Well, your personal data should be protected and it should be used in a fair and legal way, meaning it should be collected for a specified purpose and with your consent. And also, you have the right to access your data and to change anything that is wrongly recorded.
One of the main principles of the GDPR is to rebalancing vulnerabilities and power imbalance. So the GDPR was conceived as a way to reduce the adverse effects or to prevent or mitigate the adverse effects of power imbalance between companies processing our data or public administration and individuals that might suffer from vulnerabilities.
Organizations also have to stick to 7 principles or risk paying a hefty fine. Like in 2021, when Amazon was fined €746 million by the EU. Basically, those principles focus on making sure any data that's processed is done lawfully, accurately, and for an actual purpose, because an organization shouldn't be collecting data just because they can. And even though they already had the toughest data laws in the world, the EU decided the GDPR didn't go far enough. So, lawmakers have brought in the Digital Services Act package, combining 2 acts, the Digital Services Act, the DSA, and the Digital Market Act, the DMA. Without going into too much detail, the DSA will protect users by giving us more control over what we see online, things like targeted advertising, and stop us seeing illegal or harmful content. And then the DMA focuses more on boosting the digital economy by helping smaller digital companies compete against the bigger ones. But the question is, even with these new rules added on, has the GDPR really made your data that much safer?
On paper, it's a good law.
That's Paul-Olivier Dehaye, privacy expert and CEO of Hestia Labs.
It's definitely going in the right direction. It's being copied around the world, but there is a severe problem of enforcement.
Enforcing the law across the 27 states is difficult. The way it works is like this. There are 27 National Data Protection Authorities, or DPAs, one for each country, which act independently from the government to enforce the GDPR. All the DPAs work together within the European Data Protection Board. And at the top, the European Data Protection Supervisor manages everything.
It's super complicated to enforce the GDPR in a cross-country case involving more than 2 or 3 countries usually. So even the Commission recognized that enforcement is an issue.
So, to try to fix these flaws, the EU Commission is working on yet more new rules to be brought in summer 2023. Okay, so you get it. It's not perfect, but well, it's not all bad either.
The GDPR is indeed a very good balancing between the free flow of information and the protection of individuals. On the one hand, we have clear principles like lawfulness, fairness, transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization. Then we have clear rights, right to access to all my data, right to erase personal data relating to me that are being processed by some data controllers that maybe I don't want to, right to object, right to rectification of personal data. There are interesting accountability duties that data controllers need to respect. For example, impact assessment or recording of data processing.
Okay, now let's get back to what you're really here for. What can you do to protect or access your data? So let's start with your rights. As a consumer or data subject, you have the right to know why your personal data is being processed, where the organization got your data from, who it will be shared with, and how long it will be stored. And also what type of personal data is being processed. For example, anything that might relate to health, race, or political beliefs, or any other sensitive information. And crucially, how to exercise your data protection rights. Let's see a real-life example of how you could exercise those rights we just talked about. Well, let's say I ordered that code I was looking at on the train, but now I keep on getting pestered with emails from the company. I want to find out what personal information I provided when I made my order, and also ask them to delete that data. I should send a written request to the company's data protection officer, or if they don't have one, just sending to their general contact address is fine too, and specify exactly what I'm asking them to do, giving them enough information for them to identify my data. So in this case, my name, contact info, and the item I ordered. Oh, and remember, there's no fee for making a data access request. After I've sent this, the company has 1 month to respond to my request, or up to 2 if the data is complex. In this case, the data the company will have on me includes my name, email address, my phone number, my home address, where they sent the code I ordered, and a list of all the other orders I've ever made with them. And if I'm unhappy with the outcome and want to make a complaint, I can then contact the National Data Protection Authority in my country, who take action and make sure that the company sticks to the rules. Just remember, it is your right to be able to access the personal data that an organization has collected about you. And knowing your rights is important.
It's your fundamental right to know what is going to be done with the data, because it's a democracy, and you want to know what is going to be done with your data. Information is power. If you don't know with whom you share the information, you don't know with whom you share the power.